Please join me in giving a warm welcome to director Tenzin Phuntsog. Thank you so much for being with us and for the film. It looked really beautiful on the big screen, and I'm excited to pick your brain.
Yes.
To begin with, I wonder if you could speak about where cinema, and specifically narrative film, fits within your broader multimedia practice. Because it's, as I mentioned in my introduction, this is your first narrative feature film, but you've worked extensively with audiovisual materials in your installation work and just across your practice. So I'm curious, why a feature film with this subject?
I made a short film called Pure Land, and there's some things that you want to say and you don't know how to say it except through film. And there's this kind of, I feel like with when I'm working with narrative, well, I like that the ability to see these experiences, these scenes from everyday life, and there's something magical about putting it up on the screen and showing it and letting it breathe and live as it is. And so that kind of time format for me is why I'm really drawn to it. And the thing I'm like always just kind of like just love about cinema is like when you see something, like you see something that you're trying to, like, you can't articulate it in a sentence, but you can feel it through the accumulation of that sitting, that duration of that 2 hour, or in this case 73-minute film. And I think there's this kind of feeling, there's this kind of aura that kind of that you can get through that sustained duration.
You've experimented in many formats, many media within the audiovisual sort of umbrella. And I'm struck by the fact that you chose a more realistic and linear narrative register for this film. I'm also struck by the fact that the house scenes were shot in your parents' home, I believe. So there's a documentary element already to the context of the story that you're telling, but involving actors who are acting out a script as opposed to living out a documentary sequence of events. I'm curious why you chose this format specifically and this sort of in-between space between documentary and fiction.
Yeah. I don't think I was trying to make, I wasn't so conscious about the documentary aspect of it. I was really thinking about how I can make this film in the most practical way. And I think I had a much more ambitious version of the film, and I think there was a version of the film I was like, okay, what is the thing that I really care about if I had to strip it all away? And it was just these moments between the family, and yeah, sticking to that one location. And also, I've worked with my mother before in past works, and so. That's a relationship that's kind of you can see that through my body of work, and these are questions that we talk about at the dining table. These are questions that I think Tibetan families talk about or should be talking about, and for me it was really important to bring that honest realism. Like for one of the things I talk about is that's my parents' home in suburban California, and I think there's a kind of honesty to showing that, as opposed to trying to make them live in sort of a mid-century modern home. That's fine, but I just want it to be true to that beauty that I know, that I can speak to, and so I think there's a kind of vulnerability in that too. And so I think it just comes down to just being honest with yourself and like, what is your truth? What is the beauty in front of you?
Could you speak a bit about the cast that you assembled, both the family members and also the sort of ancillary figures of the doctor and the monks, the religious leaders. I'm curious how you found these individuals and how you worked with them.
Yeah, that's a good question. So my mother, we know that story. Tewang, the father, he's a family friend of ours, and a lot of those words are like just directly from conversations I've had with him. Surprisingly, he also played a father who passes away in Kundun, directed by Martin Scorsese. So, we brought him back for one more time. And then, the Tibetan doctor, he actually goes on this walk with my parents on this hill every day. And so one day I was with my parents walking up the hill, and I saw this guy. I said, "This guy looks really interesting. He has these gold earrings." And I found out he actually runs the little prayer group that they have. I said, "Dad, give me his number. I want to cast him in my film." And I said, "Do you want to be in the film?" He said, "Yes." I was like, "Yes." And he's so good. He's so good. And the Lama, I mean, this is the crazy thing about the film. There's so many karmic traces in the film. So the Lama actually knew my father when he was a kid. And now he's in Berkeley at the Gyuto Foundation. He's no longer a layman. He's a monk. And we went to the temple, and we're looking for someone who wants to be in the film. And my father's like, "Oh, I know you from childhood." And so that was our in. And then he was so gracious with us. He said, "We can do the prayers, we can do the scenes, but they have to be the real prayer, and they have to be the first take. We're not going to redo it." So there's also that kind of cinema verite, kind of run and gun, kind of we only got that take. And so when the monk gives that one monologue, that's just him, stream of consciousness. I wasn't going to write my version of the Book of the Dead as an expert, so I let him do that. And it was so profound, and it was, I just love how those lines just kind of hit. I could just go on about that scene, but it's one of my favorite scenes.
I want to ask you about, there's such a musicality really to the formal construction of the film, the sort of visual logic, the way, the place where you place the camera, how you use the camera, but also the sort of rhythms of the editing. And I'm curious to what extent this was scripted and to what extent it was a more intuitive process on set, and how that parallels or perhaps diverges from your practice in other formats.
Yeah, I was just talking about this. It's, as you know, it's a tiny miracle to make your first feature. And I think all the filmmakers and new directors can attest to that. And with this film, yes, we had a script, but halfway through the film, of the shoot, I stopped production because I didn't like what I was feeling. I didn't like, we were shooting too much death. And this is something that I want to take with me to all my projects, and definitely to my next narrative film. And we stopped following the script, and the second half of the film was all in just from what we had shot, me figuring out what's a good balance. So we went outdoors. We were all inside for the first half of the shoot. So we spent the next 2 weeks outside in the grass, walking through the trees, having that karaoke moment, having a happy family dinner. I wanted to balance all of that heaviness, and I think there's something, there's the text, there's a scaffolding, but then when you're filming it, there's you can feel if this is the right balance. And luckily, I was able to have enough wisdom to make that judgment call. We took a week off. And then I just got my head together, came back, and we just, every morning I would wake up, 6 a.m. or 5 a.m., I would just write the scenes, and we shoot it very much like Godard, and I think that's when I felt the most alive, is just, you have an idea, you have these people here, you have a location, you write something, and you shoot it. That is so fun. and that's how I want to work.
I want to ask also about the sound design of the film, which is perhaps deceptively subtle in its attentiveness to the natural environment, to the sort of tactility of materials and of the gestures of a ritual. And then there are moments, of course, where it sort of crescendos to whether that's the doctor listening to the body of the father and interpreting it, or the chants that are part of the religious practices. Could you just speak a little bit about your sort of thinking around sound with this film?
There's a lot to say when it comes to sound. One thing I always say is thinking with the potential of sound, and I think a lot of filmmakers talk about this, is when you're thinking about the shot, you have to have the image and the sound in your head. And so I very much was like, even though we're not getting that awesome footstep down the steps, I hear it in my head. It's just like that's it. It's just or moving around, and it's that. Like you're just pre-visualizing it. So there was a lot of that, and then there was also like very technical, like amazing things that we did in the sound edit, like making certain scenes blend with other scenes spatially through sound. And of course, like the pulse reading scene, like I can just touch into that for a second. I'm just touching about the whole film, but that scene, sound, it allowed me to go into this metaphoric, inner landscape. That scene was like the first scene I had in my head when I was coming up with this film. When I had that scene built out in my head, I knew I had a film, because that device, I think I said this at the very beginning, the first question, like when a film can talk about something that's so hard to explain, like I can't sit here and tell you like exactly like the sorrows of these people's lives or my life, but if you feel it through the scenes and you see it through that duration, like you can feel that honesty, that truth, right? And so with that scene, I was able to show you that pain, the truth of that pain, how deep it goes, just through this creative act. And so that was so important for me. Yeah.
I'm so interested in sort of drawing on what you just said, with regard to revealing an emotional process that's not demonstrative, that's not performed, but that we, the viewer, perceive by way of ritual, whether that's a spiritual practice, religious ritual, or sort of a familial ritual, the rhythms of a family interacting, or even the sort of bureaucratic ritual of navigating this immigrant status and exile status. Could you just speak about how you approached that kind of challenge of drawing emotional meaning out of sort of non-demonstrative expression?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and that's how do I do justice to that question? So I think with things in life that are complicated, you don't want to simplify it, but you also don't want to say it's just this or it's just that. It's actually all these colors, and there's happy moments and sad moments, and there's mundane things, and all of that is part of this thing called life. So yeah, it's just this knowing of life. I think I think it's just this intuition, this intuitive feeling. I don't want to be here on the stage telling you what to feel or what to think. I want you to feel those things on your own and come to those conclusions on your own. And I think the magic of the cinema is, there's something happening, and you get to make your own kind of like reading of it. And there's something powerful about that duration again. And that's why, like, you have those happy moments stacked with those sad moments. Yeah, I don't know what to say except, like, this is the life that I see in front of me, and I'm just trying to do justice to that.
No, that's beautiful. I want to leave time for audience questions. I see a few hands already. We have a mic that'll come around. We can start here in the front.
Hi there. Love this film, beautiful. My question is your use of silence and the natural world, because it seems like there's this clash between the traditional way that they're living and the sharp edges of the architecture and the modernity, being able to deal with the homesickness and the sense of isolation. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, like a similar follow-up to the question about the sound and like the demonstrativeness. Instead of me trying to say like the suburban life is cold and meaningless, and these spiritual scenes are everything, I think there's a bit of grace in both of those, and I think when you hear the sprinklers going off, and someone just passed away and they're doing a Tibetan ritual. Maybe 50 years ago in Tibet, that ritual was never synced to a sprinkler sound, right? Now we got that. Thank you. Yeah, so I love that kind of like, that weirdness. Yeah, I love it. Thank you for that question.
I wonder if that also, well, I see a hand right here in the red shirt, I think. Yes, there's the mic.
Was it your intention in most of the scenes, right from beginning to the end, nature, you concentrated on nature, and it was incredible because the characters were speaking, but you got their back, and we're most used to in the cinemas watching people's faces, and all the acting is in the eyes. But in your film, it was nature, so powerful. The trees, that particular tree, and the rock where the sun, sat and did that anguish cry. It was so powerful. And I just felt throughout it was nature. Even in the pulse, I could hear the wind and the water. And it was like throughout Tibet, calling. I mean, was that your intention of not seeing too many of the faces, but more on seeing what they can see and get that intense, beautiful feeling? I would like to know your direction for...
Thank you for that question.
Thank you.
That one scene you're talking about, when the family's sitting and they're talking and you see them on a hill and then you see these kind of suburban tract homes in the distance. Yeah, it was really important for me to frame them in that landscape, right? And I think of a famous scene in Ozu's film where they're just sitting out and they're looking at the ocean. And I think framing them in that landscape, there's something about that I'm very drawn to. And then also we return to that landscape, and the tree that you're mentioning is the eucalyptus tree. But I'm happy that you got all that from those scenes. I think as an intention, yes, for sure, nature is an important part of the film. Thank you.
If I may just ask a follow-up, building on this question. Technology is everywhere in this film, and it almost feels like a counterpart to the natural environment that's also so present. Was that a sort of a dialogue that you were interested in setting up?
I think it's, again, like balance, right? And we were filming inside a lot. I wanted to go outside, and I had this idea of virtual reality for a long time. And I think when you're shooting, you just, how can I, you get to, you have a crew, so you get to, try out these ideas, these crazy ideas. And so we this wasn't in the script, so we went to Best Buy and got the goggles. It's like, we're going to go to Best Buy, get those goggles, and we're going to shoot this thing. And I was inspired by this really, it comes from life. Like I saw this shot, the shot that you see in the VR, it was actually just a clip that someone uploaded in Tibet on their cell phone. And it was just this beautiful spring day where the flowers are just blooming. And it was all pixelated, it was low res, but there was something so impressionistic and beautiful about it. And I just wanted to live in that 10-second clip that someone uploaded a little bit longer. And so I just dreamed up this scene where they're in VR, but they're in that clip. And yeah, that was the inspiration. It was just a little dream that I had.
I see a question right here in the center. The mic will come. Yeah.
Hi there, thanks. I haven't read the program in a couple of days, and I recollect that it was described as a Tibetan family exiled in Mexico,
U.S.
in U.S.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a U.S.-Mexico co-production. That's where you saw the Mexico.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, because when I was watching the film, I said, no, this is California landscape and service road along the freeway. So that's my question. I did notice that Carlos Regadas was a executive producer credit. So you have a connection to him, or he came to you, or what was the deal? Thank you.
Yes. No, this relationship with Carlos started back in the pandemic. I hosted a virtual workshop with him. And after that workshop, it was a really like almost going on 2-hour long workshop. And at the end of it, I knew he was already running Splendor Omnia, like a post-production studio. And at the end of that workshop, Carlos just invited me to come to the studio on, whenever I had a project. And so in the back of my mind, I've always saw this film being finished there with their sound team. They have very good sound. And so, yeah, when we went there, I say this I think in the Filmmaker magazine article. It's like we made a second film through the sound pass. So that's the question. That's the connection to Carlos.
I think we can take one or two more. Just I see one here on the corner. Yep.
Hi, thank you so much for your film. I want to validate you in your VR set choice, because similar to you, we went to Best Buy, me and my family were from the suburbs of Colorado. We bought my Momola the same VR headset, and she too sits in the living room with the VR headset. And she looks at landscapes of what looks to be Tibet, but it's not really Tibet, but places that look like Tibet. But I found that to be really funny in the film. I was thinking of my own family. But I think there's something to be said about your film and the direction and the theme that you took it in. I think there's something really interesting when we think about the first generation experience of a lot of, Himalayan people here in the States. And when you try to approach something as large as death, for example, and you think about the Bardo, I'm really interested in knowing about what made you land on that particular theme and to look at it through the lens of the son, Rikzin, and what kind of pushed you to, for us as the viewer, to see it through his perspective in this very suburban light. Tijana.
No, thank you. I'm so glad you had that nice moment in the film. The character Rigzin, he kind of very much kind of mirrors like the questions I have. I kind of see him as like a doppelganger. So he's kind of living out some of these questions I have, and these, I think death is, I said it in the press social media interview, it's not just about mortality, it's about, brings up the question about belonging. So, where is your place? And these kind of questions really come up when when you're about to pass. So it's not just about where you belong. And I'm speaking from the Tibetan diasporic perspective, and I think it's probably universal for many people. But like belonging, questions about the future, spiritual reflection, that's a very big part of Tibetan culture. And so all those things, even though you may have been living this kind of, just trying to get by in the States for X amount of years, it all comes rushing back. And when I met the head of the monastery at Gyuto, he says, because there's a lot of Tibetan families who live in the East Bay in Berkeley. He says, when someone passes away, that's when we start seeing everyone come back to the temple, and everyone starts to, get really religious. So there's that. It's pulled from real life. So yeah, it's like it's that pivotal moment. And also with Tibetan culture, you thinking about reincarnation, your karma. It's so important, especially to have a smooth rebirth. And so I think that touching into that moment with care and sensitivity, as opposed to this blunt end, in the film, it kind of opens up the possibility of him returning to Tibet as a bird. And I thought that was such a kind of poetic way. And let me just say this before I forget and before people leave, that line of him being reborn as a bird actually came from the monks themselves. So that was actually a real divination that they did for the fictional father when he passed away, and he said he'll be reborn as a bird. And so I just took that and put it in the film.
I think I saw one more hand. Now I see two. We can take this one right here.
I have to ask, why are those family photos destroyed so immediately after the father's death? It's actually almost painful to see.
Sure.
And I have a second question, which is, I saw that a lot of the shots were still, but I noticed there was this one scene when, immediately after the dad passed away, I saw that the mom was walking around the living room with a little incense burner or lantern, and that was when your camera moved forward a little bit, instead of remaining completely still. So was that intentional, or is there a purpose for that? Thank you.
Yeah, we had quite a few dolly moves, but they're all very subtle. Yeah, that was definitely intentional. And the question about, what was the first question again? About the photos. Yeah, so that is a tradition that it's not widely practiced, but I'll just give you the context, and so you have it. Some people believe that when you burn the photos, you actually are, letting the spirit have less attachment to this world, and also you yourself have less attachment. So it's a practice of emptiness and letting go. So it's not you're burning these photos because this is your ex-girlfriend and you hate them. It's not that. I know it can be read that way, potentially without the context, but I also didn't want to over-explain it. So it's just, yeah, it is what it is, but it comes from that tradition.
I think one final question right here on this end.
You talked about why you made the movie, why you chose the topic, but perhaps you can tell us why now?
Yeah, I think for me personally, this is a question that I'm also going to have to confront, and so I think about it all the time, and I think there is. For me, as someone who cannot return to Tibet, I think thinking about these things is so important because it allows you to move through life with a different set of intentions and a different set of perspectives, as opposed to thinking everything is going to be all right. You have this limited time and limited opportunity. And so what can be done, and it's very much like coming to this film, I'm not going to make Abbas Kiarostami's, where's this, the friend's house. I can't go to Tibet and make that film. So, but I can make this film in the States. So I think it's very important for me to kind of to ask those questions. And then I was also thinking about Tibetan language. I was thinking about showing Tibetan stories on screen, and just giving it a chance to just be what it is without any propaganda, without any politics. I mean, the politics is always there, but I wanted to center a story that had the family and a story with heart at the center of it. And hopefully those peripheral things that we all have to deal with, the bureaucracies, the politics, the borders, for a moment, it was lifted and we were able to experience the humanity together.
That's a lovely note to close on, I think. So thank you all for joining us, and thank you so much, Tenzin.
Thank you for coming.